mono-orbital decks actually viable in the meta? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Wonders Workshop, everybody. And I'm really excited to deep dive into this question of, can you play a single orbital deck in Wonders right now and be successful? And I want to be clear, all of this is completely my opinion. I do not speak for the game makers. I do not speak for, any of that. And this is my opinion based on my experiences, based on what I have seen playing with the people that I play with. And I'm very fortunate to have multiple people that I can play with on the regular. And so, I've seen a lot of different decks play in a lot of different ways. And so I think there's just a couple of things that we need to kind of think about when we're trying to decide whether or not a mono-orbital deck can be meta. I'm planning to do a video at some point about what the kind of very meta decks are right now, and they are mostly non-mono-colored. They pull from a lot of different orbitals, different colors, however you would like to refer to it, to, pull together the best of a lot of things. But there are a lot of things that in the card game that they don't take advantage of. So for y'all's reference, one of the main decks that I play against, not the main deck that I play, but one of the main decks that I play against is a Tallwind only deck. Just Tallwind. There's not even a sprinkling of a color of a non-core card that would, my deck that I traditionally play is Umbrathine and Heliosense, but I have 3 Seer's Gazes in there because, you need a Seer's Gaze. But there's not even a little sprinkling of anything else. It is a Tallwind and Tallwind only deck. And it's probably 50-50 on whether or not I win. The person I play against and myself are fairly evenly matched in skill level. So it shakes out, and our decks are pretty well evenly matched in play level. So it's fun for us to play. But there's always some hijinks in this deck. And I think one thing that people don't think about when they're thinking about how much support there is in the game for single orbital decks is how many cards support that. For instance, let's go into the Codex, Cardio, whatever we would like to call it. And if we look at lands, the one I'm looking for is a common, the ones, and it starts with reveal. And you'll see there are 6 lands that meet the criteria that I've just searched. And they all say the same thing on them. On harvest, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a boundless card, draw it, otherwise bury it. The boundless one says boundless, Solfera says Solvera, so on and so forth. You can guess how this works. So there's a lot of support in each orbital for playing mono-orbital decks. I mean, let's look at it another way. I don't know how many people have bought starter kits. I would guess that most people have bought a starter kit. Now, the 2 decks in those starter kits are mono-orbital. Please note, yes, there is a first in the packaging. That first is not part of the 50 card deck. If you are trying to play one of those decks and you want to play it in tournament, you have to pull out the first, otherwise it will not be a legal deck. It'll have 51 cards and not be legal. One of the things that I think is really great about that deck, about those 2 decks, the Tallwind and the Solfera Tallwind, however you would like to pronounce it, I've heard it both ways from people who've made the game, is that they're really easily modifiable to become better versions of those decks. The Tallwind deck that I play against on the regular is a modified version of that starter deck. Now, it's been heavily modified, as in there's 4 or 5 mythics in it, and half the deck has been changed up, and it's optimized for how that deck is supposed to operate now. But the starter kits come with mono-orbital decks Furthermore, the orbital starter decks that were put out with the Kickstarter are all mono-orbital. So there's a lot of support in various places in the game for mono-orbital cards, for mono-orbital decks. I think right now the meta makes people feel like they really have to just like push into this multicolored thing. And that's great if that's what you want to do. But you shouldn't feel like you have to do that if it's not something that you want to do. For instance, you know, I have seen lots of people, I've sat down and played a lot of games with those orbital starter decks. And they're all a heck of a lot of fun. I was playing against my dad one time, and I was playing a older version of my main deck. And he was playing the Umbrathine orbital starter deck. And, you know, it was back and forth for a little while, going back and forth, you know, some stuff, figuring out. My dad would make a play and I'd make a play, so on and so forth. Exactly. You know how the Wonders vibe goes. You know, it's fun. You're playing the player as much as you are playing the deck that you're playing against. And one of the things that I found really interesting playing my Death Strike equipment deck against the Umbrathine, Death Strike, and Graveyard Recursion deck is that deck could out Death Strike and out Graveyard my deck that was trying to do other things. So particularly for beginners, and particularly if you're trying to focus on something, then, you know, if you're trying to focus on one ability or you're starting out, doing a single orbital deck and focusing on that single ability, honing all the cards in your deck towards that single win condition can be really powerful. Now, you don't want to have a deck in huge competition that only has one win con, but most orbitals themselves have more than one win condition. It's not as simple as just one and done. For instance, I've talked about Courageous Heart Emblem on the game, on the channel before. Well, let's see if I can spell. I can't, but that's okay, because we have autocorrect, friends, and autocorrect is wonderful when it works. It would help if I didn't have land still clicked. Check your filters, y'all. Here it is. Courageous Heart Emblem. So on round 7, this gets attuned Tallwind. If there are no enemies in this realm at the end of round 7, gain control of target stone here. That's basically a win condition. I have lost to this card. I didn't know it was in hand. I have lost to this card knowing it was in hand. Just being able to take a stone, if you can portal a wonder out of this realm, destroy a wonder in the realm where this is, you've got a win condition right there. Sometimes when I'm playing against the Tallwind deck, I just get so stunned. Like, not stunned as in, ah, wow, like stun as in the card ability. Because there are so many cards in Tallwind that do stun. Frost Savage, Marinus, Stormforged Seed Feast, like all these cards can stun your wonders and reduce their power to 0, tap your creature. Reduce to 0 until end of the round. And when you combo that with, you know, other hijinks and shenanigans of controlling the board, you have a win condition there. If my creatures if the power of all my wonders is 0, there's not really a chance for me to win. But there's just so many different ways that you can win in a single orbital deck that I really do think that they're a lot more meta and a lot more viable in meta than people think they are. I want to encourage people to like try building a single orbital deck. I think you'd be surprised at how much support there is 4 single orbital decks. My next deck build is going to be a Sulfera only deck, and I am really excited to see how that goes, and like if there's some viability there, like not viability, but like how well that works in the way that I want to do it, because I don't plan on doing I don't plan on modifying the starter deck. I plan on building from scratch and focusing around the Viking theme that's kind of going on there. And, you know, there's just so many cards that synergize, particularly in the lands. If we look at Frostfire Citadel here, whenever you draw your second card in a round, all your Tallwood Wonders get +1 this round. Again, a lot of the cards in orbitals will target other cards in that orbital. Tallwind is particularly I see this most with Tallwind, but it's also the deck that I see played like that the most. So, you know, I don't know for certain, but I would argue that it's kind of super meta to play, or maybe not super meta, but it can be super powerful to play a single orbital deck. And I think, you know, I've talked about this before, it's as much the player, and it's equally the player and it's equally the deck that decides whether or not you win. And I think that's something that people need to be aware of. I think, you know, figuring out what playstyle works best for you, and if that's a single orbital, don't be afraid to play a single orbital. A lot of seek effects seek specifically in the same orbital as the card. So again, there's a little bit more support there in Tallwind. But, you know, there are a lot of really viable decks, I think, that are mono-orbital, and I think we're all kind of so focused on the Seeking Mouse and all the other Awakening Lands, all the other super meta decks that I really would love to see some other things kind of working, and, you know, coming up with some different ideas. And, you know, people ask the question, is a mono deck, can it be meta? I think the answer is yes. And I'm really excited to see if anybody plays a mono-orbital deck at the next competition. So that's kind of what I've got for you today. I think that mono-orbital decks are, in fact, viable in meta, and I'm really excited to see where people go with this. So please, as always, like, comment, subscribe, and keep being your wonderful selves.